Okay. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. So today we have two very special guests. I see Al-Adi is not here yet. He'll join later. But we're going to start with Gila. So we're actually going to jump into the end. So we're going to have a brief overview of Jewish-Christian dialogue or relations after October 7th nowadays, and then the second half of the meeting will be about American Islam. It's especially for those of you, Yuda, thank you for the idea. So we're going to have some preparation with someone. His PhD is on Islam in America. And he wasn't on the program originally, but thanks to you, he is. So we're going to meet him. And then actually, not next week. Next week we don't have a meeting. After next week, we're going to actually go back and actually study about Islamic Christianity from the roots and climb our way up back again. But just to get a snapshot of where we stand. So my dear friend Gila, Dr. Gila Mati is here from the JPPI. We also did a postdoc together last year at Bar-Ilan University on Judaism and I forgot.
Ecology.
Not sustainability, ecology, yeah.
Sustainability. Okay.
I lost the word for a second. Kayamut. And actually, it hasn't been published yet. As you can see, also like last week, we're bringing you stuff which is like fresh out of the oven. This is stuff that has not even been published and discussed yet. Hopefully it will be published. And she did a very, very interesting research about interfaith dialogue after October 7th. As a disclaimer, I was one of the interviewees as well. Rav Yaakov was one of the interviewers. She interviewed, I don't know how many, like dozens of people, I assume, like
25 people.
25, okay. But today she's going to focus on Jewish-Christian relations, especially with the Vatican and the Catholic Church. So Gila, let's start with your presentation.
Yes, can I share the screen?
You should be able to.
Okay, let's see.
If not, I'll give you permission. So let's do a presentation for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have about 20-25 minutes for discussion. And then the second part will be Dr. Elad Ben David, who will speak about Islam in America, in like contemporary Islam in America.
I think I do need permission.
Okay, so let me. Oh, there you go. Can you share now?
See? Okay.
Okay, great. So Gila, thank you for coming. The floor is yours. If you want to say a few more words of introduction, feel free to do so, and then we'll just jump right in.
Okay. Yeah, so after that, maybe you can tell me a few words about the participants, because I'm not sure.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, and anyway, okay, so my name is Gila Mati, and as Aaron Ariel said, I have this is a study that I've done in the past year and a half, 2 years almost, as part of, is a research that I've done in JPPI, in the Jewish People Policy Institute, and I focus in my research on interfaith relationships after October 7th. And today, as you can see, I will speak about Catholic Jewish relationships after October 7th. My study is based on 25 in-depth interviews, along with analysis of official statements, articles, and public reactions that happened after October 7. We are dealing, of course, with an historic moment of crisis, one that affected decades of interreligious dialogues. And that's what I'm going to show today, especially in the Jewish Catholic context.
Great. So let me just tell you a word about the group.
Yeah. Okay.
So at the Ottawa Interfaith Center, we have a local Israeli program of fellows, and this is the international fellowship program for interfaith diplomacy. So we have rabbis, leaders, educators from literally all over the world. We have about half the group is American, but we also have South Africa and Kenya and Europe, and we have another group in Australia that meets on a different time zone, so it's impossible to get everybody together. And we meet every week online. Some of us are going to be next week at the International Religious Freedom Summit in Washington. That's why we want to learn also about American Islam in the second part of this meeting. And it's not adult education. That's the one thing I do want to emphasize. This is a training program and networking for rabbis who are going to actually engage in this field. So it's not just so what you're going to share tonight, and I heard this lecture already, which is fascinating. is actually it's actual practical tools for us. It's not just nice information to know or background. It's actually we need to know this if we want to be effective in the
Yeah.
work we do. And that's it. And we all read, I hope you all read Nostra Aetate. I sent it to you last week. We'll have a deeper dive into that in 2 weeks, but just for background. So back to you, Gila.
No, so I'm sure most of you are going to have their own opinion about what happened after October 7th, so I'm happy to hear about this later. Also, the people that I've interviewed are practitioners, rabbis, people that work in interfaith dialogue. So I'm also interested to hear what you think. But again, let's go back to what I have to say. So the Hamas massacre and the war that followed the massacre were experienced as a breaking point in the relationship built over more than 60 years since Nostra Aetate, as Aaron Ariel said, between the church and the Jewish people. The lecture focuses on 3 different perspectives: the official Vatican response, the reactions within Jewish leadership and Jewish society regarding this response, and the experiences of activists, especially Jews, working on the ground. The rupture did not come only from the events themselves, but also from how Jewish pain was understood or not understood by the church. So I don't know how many of you know the history of the relationship between the church and the Jews, but I think it's important to give a brief summary of what happened since 1965. So in 1965, a revolution happened in Jewish-Christian relationships. The Pope Paul VI, at the end of the Second Vatican Council, issued the Nostra Aetate, which is a document that rejected the teaching of contempt denied by the church, denied Jewish guilt for Jesus' death, and affirmed the ongoing covenant with Israel and committed the church to fighting anti-Semitism. So this is the more important step in after the Holocaust in Jewish-Christian relationship. After that, we have a few important steps and episodes that it's important to underline. In 1986, Pope John Paul II visits for the first time the Synagogue of Rome, which revolutionized the relationship between the Jews in Rome. We were for centuries closed in ghettos with the church. In 1993, diplomatic relationships were established between Israel and the Holy See, recognizes Israel's right to exist and guaranteeing religion. And from the side of Israel, the freedom of religious freedom was guaranteed to pilgrims coming from the Christian worlds. And in 2000, John Paul II visited the Western Wall and asked for forgiveness for Catholic sins against the Jews. And in 2015, Pope Francis in his marks of 50 years of Nostra Aetate states that to attack Jews is considered anti-Semitism, and a direct attack on the state of Israel is also considered anti-Semitism. So we can say that until 2023, the relationship between the church and the Jewish people were considered a success story, something stable and secure. Okay. And then the October 7th happened, and the Vatican response to the October 7 events was widely perceived as a failure. On October 8th, 2023, Pope Francis condemned both terrorism and war at the same time, saying that war is a defeat, every war is a defeat, setting a pattern of avoiding a very clear taking a moral and clear side and keeping this neutral language. Cardinal Parolin, which is the Vatican Secretary of State, called the attacks inhuman and affirmed Israel's right to self-defense, but within a very balanced and diplomatic framework. And the Jerusalem Patriarchs issued a joint statement condemning arms to civilians without explicitly naming Hamas. So from the Jewish side, what the church saw as a careful diplomacy and universal concern was experienced as a refusal to name evil clearly and to stand openly with the victims. The Jews felt that the Pope language suggested a false moral equivalence between attacker and victims, and the Israeli embassy criticized the patriarch's statement as immoral linguistic ambiguity, saying that it failed to clarify who the aggressor was and who the victims were. In response to the Pope declarations and to the Vatican declarations, rabbis and Jewish scholars got together. Among them, we have Dr. Karma Ben Hanan and many other important Jewish scholars and rabbis involved in interfaith dialogue with Christians. Decided to write a letter to Pope Francis directed directly to him. And in the letter, they called the October 7 the largest pogrom since the Holocaust and the most severe wave of anti-Semitism since 1945. This letter was not aggressive. It was an appeal from a long-time partners, and was asking from the Pope for moral clarity that they thought this group of Jews thought of Jewish exponents thought was missing. They had three main requests: clear moral judgment from the Pope, a distinction between terrorism and civilian casualties in war, and three, solidarity grounded in the Christian ethic of love of the neighbor. It's interesting that the Pope actually responded to this letter, which was also a very unique thing. But I think that his response remained pretty neutral and on the same page that a similar page of before.
Gila, can you explain? It's unique that he actually responded, like he doesn't respond?
No, because this letter was sent directly to him. They didn't use an indirect channel. It wasn't through, and it wasn't sent to us, the organization of Interfaith in the Vatican. It was sent to the Pope directly, and the Pope sent a direct response. So I think
that's a unique case. Like it doesn't happen like this usually.
Yeah, it's something very unique. It is unique. And also the organizers of the letter did feel this uniqueness and did feel grateful to the Pope for this, for the fact that he gives so much room and importance to their feelings. But at the same time, if we read the letter, I don't think there is a big change, and it didn't move so much from his previous views. But it is important that he related to it directly. Okay, so now I want to speak about another very important event that happened after October 7th. From the Pope's side, in December 2024, after the Pope Francis expressed its sorrow for children killed in Gaza, Israel's foreign ministry accused him of creating a double standard and ignoring context. The ministry stated that cruelty lies with terrorists hiding behind children and criticized the Pope for ignoring this reality. In my interview, in an interview that I undertaken with Rabbi Riccardo Di Segni, which is the chief rabbi of Rome, he warned that calls for prayer alone, issued by the church, by the Pope, can become often an alibi, and he argued that stepping outside the conflict can lead to superficiality, erase moral distinction, and create false neutrality. He was very much disappointed from the neutrality of the church, this general declaration of general prayer, and felt that they were used as an alibi to not take a real stand. And he felt really abandoned by the church, so much that it is said to me that in a meeting that was supposed to happen about that previous year in January, the Jewish people of Rome were thinking not to participate because they didn't feel that the church was on their side or was understanding the pain of the Jewish people and the side of the Jewish people. Okay, on October 7, 2024, Pope Francis published a letter citing John 8:44, describing the true enemy as the spirit of evil. For Jews, this verse is widely regarded as the most anti-Semitic verse in the New Testament, where Jesus speaks to Jews and calls them children of the devil. Historically, this verse was used to justify contempt and violence against the Jews. Naturally, the fact that the Pope decided to choose such a passage in such a verse, to quote such a verse, brought to very, very strong reaction from the side of the Jewish side. Scholar Eitan Schwartz called the letter a disaster for Jewish-Catholic relations. Professor Adar Gregerman, which I also interviewed, said that the choice was inexplicable, especially given the current levels of anti-Semitism, and many felt this move threatened the theological work built since 1960s and endangered the foundation of modern dialogue. So the crisis with the church revealed three deep fractures. The first fracture is the erasure of Jewish history and specificity. The fact that the church was framing the conflict as a world war in pieces flattered moral distinction and erased the asymmetry between a genocidal terror group and a state defending itself. The anti-Semitic nature of the attack disappeared into universal language used by the church. A second point was the erosion of the special theological bond between the Jewish people and the church. Pope Francis' emphasis on universal fraternity felt to many Jews like a weakening of the unique relationship with Judaism as the elder brother, the way the church called the Jews. And universal ecumenism seemed to replace covenantal responsibility. And the last thing is that diplomacy was overriding moral quality. Avoiding naming Hamas as a terror organization and calling quickly for ceasefires were seen as prioritizing Vatican diplomacy and regional Christian interests over a clear moral stance against anti-Semitic terror. So in a sense, from the interviewer emerged, first of all, a strong emotional disillusionment. Many Jewish practitioners felt a profound sense of betrayal from partners who seemed to prioritize universalism over empathy for the Jews. Rabbi Pesach Voliki said that for 40 years there was growing Christian support for Israel, and suddenly the war was silenced. And Rabbi Marans from the JIC criticized partners who rushed to call for ceasefires without asking the scale of the atrocity of Hamas. Another theme that came up in interviews was the fact that the rise of a new post-colonial framework. They claim that there has been, Pope Francis, a major ideological shift from post-Holocaust thinking to post-colonial thinking. Dr. Kama Ben Yohanan noted that the liberal Christianity had moved sharply in this direction, leaving less room for Jewish sensitiveness and for anti-Semitism. Israel is now framed by the church as a colonial power, making solidarity difficult for progressive Christians. Moreover, they claim that Pope Francis' global South background and focus on colonialism strongly shaped this worldview. The critic to the popes were the critic again, as I said, of false moral equivalence. The criticizing because of his Latin American background. David Rosen linked the Pope's stance to third world solidarity as rooted in his Argentine background. And Rabbi Noam Marantz argued that for Francis, his view against Israel was more about a just war, and his belief that there is not just war than a statement against Jews specifically. And some talked about the special relationship they had with the Pope and the feeling of disappointment that they felt by his definition of the war as a genocide and the many statements of the Pope. Now I want to talk about a few strategic paths that actually did work or that were resilient. The first model that I want to talk about is the model of the Church of Scotland. Rabbi Mirvis, in an important speech after October 7th, mentions this important dialogue setting. and he stated that after that in 2013, the Scottish Church published a document on Zionism that offended deeply the Jews. Rabbis and ministers from the Church of Scotland and the Jewish British communities formed a study group that confronted theological assumptions openly about Israel and about Zionism. Mills argued that as a result, after October 7th, the Church of Scotland clearly condemned Hamas and expressed solidarity with Jews. His claim was that when the elephant in the room was part of the discussion, the resilience of the dialogue was much stronger after October 7th. A second path that was taken after October 7th was the political path, which is represented by Rabbi Pesach Waliki, which resigned from his post in Interfaith Dialogue, in a specific organization of Interfaith Dialogue, to open a new one called Keeps God's Land, whose goal was to build political coalition supporting Israel. His message is that theology is not enough to solve problem, and it's important to focus in interfaith dialogue also on politics. Other interviewers actually talked about the opposite thing and said that actually the only way to keep dialogue going after October 7 was avoiding politics and focusing on issues that were universal and were ethical and theological. Rabbi Alon Gottenstein, for example, described how his institute shifted toward topics such as human dignity as a shared core value, creating non-political spaces for trust and solidarity. Okay, I want to go back to the. Okay, so we have seen that. Yes. Okay. So we've seen. I'm going to summarize now that the Vatican's response was marked by euphemism and a desire for neutrality, and was experienced by many Jews not as a pastoral sensitivity, but as a sense of an abandonment at a moment of profound communal trauma. The crisis of October 7 revealed the limits of the Church's capacity to stand with Jews against contemporary anti-Semitic violence, especially when entangled with political complexity. The Vatican's moral vocabulary, which was shaped by post-colonial sympathies and pacifist tendency, seems ill-equipped to address modern Jewish vulnerability. So even though the dialogue on the outside seemed at least to keep going, in a way Jewish trust in this case had been shaken, and the institution would then once were believed to have a very strong connection with the Jews, very much disappointed the Jewish communities. Now, as you all know, the Pope Francis died, and we have a new Pope, and there is really real questions about how and in which direction the relationship will go. For now, it's still unclear, I think, even though personally I don't have big hopes. Yes, okay.
Wow, great. Thank you, Gila. My second time, and it's concerning, but it's important to know this information and to know where we stand. So if we can stop sharing, let's open up for.
1 second. Stop share. Okay.
Okay, great. So I see almost everybody's here, and I see also Elad joined us. Hi, Elad. He's our next speaker, but he came to listen to you as well.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, let's we have like 10-15 minutes of question, and I think that there's a lot to ask and a lot to discuss about this. It is the largest religion on earth, we should say. So I have many questions myself, but I want to open up the floor first for anyone who has any questions, comments, maybe to share from your experience over the last 2 years with the Christian partners, with a focus on Catholics, because Protestants and evangelics, that's a different discussion that we'll have further down the line. So yes, Alex.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing all this with us. My question is, one of the quotes you had on there was from 2015, equating anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. But then by 2023, the false equivalency was made between, Israelis and Palestinians in this case. So what prompted that change? Is there a change, first of all, from 2015 to 2023? And if so, what prompted that change in the language that Pope Francis was using?
You're talking about the Scottish church? That's what or you're talking about the
There was one
Vatican?
slide you had at the very beginning that had like the history, and then had like the last one was 2015. It was right before the rupture.
Okay, so you're asking what happened? So I don't think the question is, so a thing is, declarations and things we say, and the second thing is think we do when things really happened. So I'm not sure if anything happened. I think the October 7th, that's why I decided also to undertake this research in the beginning, was to see, okay, we have been talking for years about interfaith and about how close we are, and we've made a lot of progress. But what happened in a time of real crisis? And there was a sense of disappointment because there was a lot of progress and a lot of things that were said, but when we actually had a true crisis, things didn't go as we would think. So how I explain it, the change wasn't truly undertaken. It was just a matter of word, but there hasn't been a true and deep change in the relationship, and this is why at the time of crisis things didn't go as we thought.
So you sense that from the first place, actually, this wasn't. It was more like a facade than.
That's why it's.
Okay.
We didn't talk enough about the right things. We didn't work up on the right things. Maybe we have to think about a new thing. We need to think on what dialogue should be about, what we should focus on. In order then, in time of crisis, things will be different. So I think this research is also very important to understand that things are not so great as we would have think, at least in the case of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, that's an important point that we touched upon and we'll touch upon again and again, that a lot of the interfaith work in the world was actually interfaith. It was very shallow, very superficial, peace and love and kumbaya, and didn't really touch on the real issues. But we'll get to there. Daniel and then Adina, okay?
First of all, thank you so much. That was really fantastic. I wanted to know to what extent you think that's because of personalities in the church or the testing of an idea. I also heard, I don't know if this is true, that somebody working close to the Vatican said, you have to understand, they were getting every single day a phone call from a Christian family in Gaza. They were getting the UN turning up every single, like the level of they also don't want to be caught on the wrong side of history. And the word genocide was being thrown at them from inside the Vatican and outside the Vatican. And you're going to be the guys who stood by Holocaust. And Israel and Jews were kind of once every few months turning up with something and sounding tone deaf. I don't know if that's fair or true. That's why I've heard on the other side. So how much do you think that's also an impact on this, and how much do you think it is just a genuine tone deafness on their side?
I don't know. First of all, I think that the fact that the Pope decided to, right the day after October 7th, October 8th, he already gave a very universal and unclear statement and a general statement instead of being like on the side of the Jews, it shows that in a way they never wanted to be on our side. The fact that at the end, like with the war going, things got more complicated. It doesn't change that even on October 8th, the Pope was very much unclear on his own side. And also, I think there are some episodes that are very disappointing, because the Pope, for example, the fact that the Pope decided to quote that quotes that I've talked to you about from John, it's crazy. Like quotes that even though you think that the Jews are going a lot of pressure from different places, you are not supposed to use this kind of quotes. Like, you are the Pope, you know what they mean. So in a sense, I feel that it's not only about outside pressure, Even though, of course, there is also that, that side of the things. But I don't think it's the only reason.
Yeah, thank you. Adina, and then Rav Shaul.
Yeah, thank you. It was a really amazing presentation. I have a question. If you or anyone else have gone back and looked at the last time there was such a crisis of interfaith partners was right before the 6-Day War, when, for example, like the National Council of Catholic Bishops, there were individual Christians who were coming to the defense of Israel because of what was going on, and said nothing. And this was 2 years after Nostra Aetate, and the Jewish community had created a severe backlash of saying, what was the point of all this? What Rabbi Aaron would say of like interfaith dialogue. I mean, this was crazy. So I'm wondering if that has been studied as a comparison where you just feel so abandoned.
I don't know. Like, I haven't seen anything about that. But it makes sense that, I think it's not surprising what you're saying. I've also been at a conference a few months ago about 6 years to Nostra Aetate, and actually one of the lectures there were actually about that, the anti-Semitism that was in the church while writing the Nostra Aetate, the fact that the church all the time wants to say that anti-Semitism is something on the side and it's not really central in the Catholic Church, but at the end of the day, it was very central at the time of Nostra Aetate, and it's really something that Nostra Aetate is not taught enough in schools. This is not a topic that they affront with other people or they teach. So it seems in a way that even though it was a big step, I'm not saying that it wasn't a big step, there is at least still a lot of work, and it's important to understand that this work needs to be done, and we're not over with it. And probably there was still a lot of work to do already in the 6-day wars, but also a day after the Nostra Aetate. It's not all over with a declaration. Things need to be worked on.
Oh, Rav Shaul, you had a question? And then Rav Yaakov.
Wanted to ask Gila, is there some address from the grounds of the church that you can understand from them how they explain or how they understand if there is a change of position from the side of the church? Like this is how we are reading and making our interpretation. I'm curious to know if they see this change also of a position from their side.
What I can say that many of the people that try to justify the Pope Francis, for example, as I've tried to say a little bit in the lecture, talked about the fact that Pope Francis has nothing negative against the Jews. He has something against wars and something against the West and about America and so it's not something against us, but as against what we represent at this time, at this point in history. So they tried to say, this also, it's not only already Jews said that, Rabbi Maran said that, David Rosen talked about it, everybody talked about it. The fact that the Pope is not an anti-Semitic is against colonialism, is against American power, capitalism. He comes from the global south, and this is the reason why he was so much against Israel during the war. So that would be a possible explanation.
Thank you. Rav Yaakov Klein.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. Fascinating. I'm curious that assuming that there are deep-rooted sources within Christian theology, which I think all of us understand there are, right, that would support anti-Semitic tendencies of one level or another, going back to Paul, and things like this. I'm curious what the fundamental motivation was ultimately for Nostra Aetate. I mean, what's in it for them? Like, I mean, why shouldn't they be as staunch as the Muslims are from the standpoint of, if they really believe that we're the devil, that's what they believe. Yalla. Like what? I mean, what? I understand what we have to gain, but like, what's in it for them to actually change their course?
So I think the Nostra Aetate came after the Holocaust. That was the main drive for doing this. The church felt very much ashamed for what happened and also responsible in a way for a lot of the anti-Semitism that of the Holocaust. So I think that was the main drive. Also from the part, the Jews also have made a lot of political work inside the church in order to achieve what they achieved. And it could be that they also do feel a little ashamed for all what they have done to us throughout the centuries. Like I would say that it could be that they have a certain kind of constant interest in doing so. Like the church, I don't think it's similar to Islam. And it has it did undergo a lot of processes and changes. And I think Catholics don't think of us anymore as they thought like centuries ago, that we killed Christ in like this direct and clear way. So things did change, and I think they wanted to make this change. But at the end, it's a deep. The roots of anti-Semitism are very, very deep, and even though maybe on a certain level they wanted to make a change, on a deeper level, it's harder to do so than you would think.
Gila, thank you so much. We have one more question from Asaf, but just 2 words of context about what you said. Historically, again, everybody can debate about it, but historically, as far as we know, what pushed the Pope at the time to do this was a book by a Jew, a French Jew named Jules Isaac, who actually traced what we all know, that anti-Semitism can be traced back to the Catholic Church and all that. And this book was really influenced the Pope, and he started a conversation with this Jewish guy, and that was the first step in the Nostra Aetate. It took years, but that's one thing. The other thing you should know, I want to put in the chat in a minute, what the Pope back then left as a short prayer to say on the day of Nostra Aetate. And for example, he writes there, "Forgive us for the cross we falsely attached to their name as Jews." This is a prayer to God, yeah. "Forgive us for crucifying thee a second time in their flesh, for we know not what we did." Okay, now if you know, I'm going to put it in the chat now. If you know New Testament, and we will study some New Testament later, this is what Jesus is saying about the Jews when they betray him and go to the Romans. "Forgive them for they don't know what they did." So the Pope is saying this about the church. We do not know what we have done to the Jews. We've crucified Jesus twice, actually, because we crucified the Jewish people. It is a very, very strong statement. So I think that specific Pope was actually philo-Semitic.
Yeah.
It was actually on our side. Maybe it was a glitch in history. Maybe it was a trend. The main question we should ask ourselves is, okay, what do we do to make it a trend and not a glitch? And with this, we'll go to Asaf's question, which will be our last question for today, and then we'll move on to Elad. So Asaf has a problem with his mic. So Gila, if you can look at the chat, please. He wrote it in text. And he's writing that he identified a critical shift in the Vatican from a post-Holocaust framework to a post-colonial framework, which views Israel as a power and not as a victim. So if this post-Holocaust sympathy is fading, especially with the rise of the global South in the church, because Europe is becoming secular already, so the center of gravity has moved to the South. So how do we build empathy for the Jewish story when the church no longer sees us as the ultimate victim, but rather frames us as a colonial power? So if you have any thoughts on that.
Maybe I think in general, I think it's a problem that a lot of times the Jews try to get empathy, like also about this war all the time, just try to show like Israel, to show how we suffered and how our situation is so difficult. And sometimes it's hard because the other side is suffering much more than us, even though it might be the right thing to do, or might be but still they're suffering more. So we can't win by the suffering card. And I don't think the church should like us because we suffer. They should like us because they like us. So maybe because we are moral people, and we represent we represent a religion that is not violent in respect of other religions or things like it should. The relationship with the church shouldn't be based on the fact that they are empathic to us, but on other things. So maybe we should work on that and not on empathy.
Yeah. Great, thank you so much. That's actually a great segue to the next. First of all, a round of applause for Gila, and thank you. You're more than welcome to stay. Thank you so much for coming. And I will use what you said as a segue to our next conversation, which is about Islam in America and a lot of many Muslims in America, what we would call people of color, the black community, not the Latino so much, but Pakistani and Middle Eastern immigrants. And what we've seen in research, and I think we talked about it last time, I think, that trying to gain empathy or gain diplomatic wins by showing Jewish suffering and victimhood is not working. Maybe it worked in the past. I'm not sure even about that, but it's not working. We did talk about the video by Robert Kraft, right, last time, which was an attempt to do that. Like, look at us, the Jews, we suffer so much. People put graffiti on our garage, and then the non-Jew comes and helps us. And this is what we should do, because this is like the role model for a good person in America to help the suffering Jews. It doesn't work, because the Jews are maybe not the first, now they're only the second most important or powerful minority in America, academically, professionally, financially, politically. So you cannot really argue for suffering. And also for a set of Israel. Israel is not a superpower, but a medium power. It's a regional power. You cannot win by trying to explain how miserable you are, especially not to people who have much less power, and they could never dream of having 2 minutes on Super Bowl night, because it costs like $25 million. They don't have access to those resources. So it actually creates the counter effect. So with that, I would like to hand over to Elad. Elad is a dear friend. He's an alum of our Israeli fellowship program from 2 years ago. He has a PhD on Islam in America. He speaks Hebrew, English, Arabic, and also Indonesian. I don't know if Rav Yaakov is here. Yeah, we have Rav Yaakov Baruch that you know, Elad, right,
Yes.
from Indonesia.
I also know him.
Like, how many people you know speak all those languages and have a PhD on Islam? So Elad is a dear friend. We also just met this week in Jerusalem on another interfaith diplomacy endeavor. And we would like to say it for us, Elad, if you can give us, let's say, a 15-20 minutes overview of
Will
Islam in
be something
America.
like 20 minutes.
20 minutes, like, first of all, Islam in America, how it came to be, what are the main factions, who against who, like what's going on there. A little bit of history, but primarily let's focus on contemporary Islam in America, the different communities, the different powers, the split in the Imam Dawudi Muhammad movement and all that. Because we're going to meet many representatives of those of American Islam next week. I mean, some of us are going to meet them. So let's start with your presentation, and then we'll have some time for questions. It's loading. Okay, yeah, now we see it.
So,
Elad, your sound is not clear. Maybe it's the headset. Come again. Let's try. No, we can see the presentation, but we cannot hear you well. You have like
now it's okay.
Now it's better. Yeah, now it's better. I think it's a microphone problem, not a connection problem. Okay, let's go.
So hello everyone again, and thank you Aaron for the invitation. And I apologize a little bit about my voice. So I will talk about Islam in America, potential and challenges for Jewish-Muslim relations, which is a highly relevant topic. So first, why Islam in America is basically important for us, Israeli or Jewish people. So first of all, Islam in America, I mean, the American Muslim community basically resides in the most powerful country in the world, Western country in the world. American Muslims are often perceived as the forefront of Western Muslim communities, and also the direct connection of the American Muslim community to the largest and biggest Jewish community, and the increasing influence of American Muslims on American global society, politics, public discourse, Mamdani as an example. So in my presentation, there will be introductory about Islam in America, pre and post 9/11. Then I will address the interreligious relations of American Muslim Jewish community, also pre and post 9/11. And then I will map some important groups and people, figures from Islam. There are a lot of groups and strands, but I will focus on three. First, the soft Islamist groups, the moderate groups, and the pro-Israeli progressive groups. And then we will conclude to summary. So Islam in America has a relatively long history dating back from the 7th century when Muslims from Africa arrived in North America as enslaved people. Although these early migrations constitute the first documented Muslim presence on the continent, there was no spread or visibility of Islam because the enslavement conditions of these groups basically prevented any organized Islamic missionary activity, what we call a dawah. With that, Islam's presence in America began to grow in the early 20th century, stemming from two main factors. First was the establishment of Islamic missionary and religious activity among African Americans, most notably through the organizations known as the Nation of Islam, led by Elijah Muhammad. The movement gained widespread support within the Black community, particularly after Malcolm X's involvement, which led to the organization's dramatic rise. Malcolm served as the national spokesperson and the most prominent figure after Elijah Muhammad, and he is widely regarded as one of the most influential figures in restoring dignity and self-confidence among African Americans and inspiring many Muslims until this day. However, Malcolm X eventually broke away from Elijah Muhammad and was assassinated in 1965. These events led, among other factors, to a split in the nation. Din Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad's son, basically broke away from his father's ideology and tried to basically reform the Nation of Islam to Orthodox Sunni Islam, while Louis Farrakhan, one of the ministers, continued the old doctrine of the Nation of Islam. So we were talking about the two main factors about the growth of Islam in America. The second was the arrival of Muslim immigrants from Middle East and Southern Asia in several major waves of migrations, beginning after the First World War, further strengthened the position of Islam in America and contributed to its institutional and communal development. Nevertheless, the significant boost to the presence and visibility of Islam began in the 50s and the 60s of the last century, mainly due to the Immigration and Nationality Act of President Johnson, and also the foundation of Muslim organizations during this time from the 60s until the 90s. Some of them were also influenced by the Muslim Brotherhood. Figures like Ahmad Sakr and Jamal Barzinji helped to consolidate the status of Islam in America. These include, for example, the MSA, ICNA, ISNA, and CARE. Today, Islam in America is the third largest religion after Christianity and Judaism. The number of the Muslim population is estimated at about 4.5. Some argue it's even 6 million. And it is also estimated to outnumber the Jewish community in the following decades. Also, as you can see here, the American Muslim community is very diverse. The biggest ethnic minority is the Afro-American, then immigrants from Southern Asia, from Arab countries, Christian that embrace Islam, and etc. And also here you can see the most populated states in America where they have the most number of Muslims. So we can see that New York is in the first place. Perhaps it also explained the rise of Mamdani. And also, while the majority of the Muslim community is most of it is Sunni, there is also a Shia community consisting of 16% of the total population in America. No doubt that 9/11 was a landmark event in US history, which marked a watershed moment for Islam in the Western Hemisphere, boosting the rise of Islamophobia in America and the West. The waves of Islamophobia included, for example, the Patriot Act, surveillance of mosques and Islamic organizations, and also the Ground Zero controversy. Nevertheless, Islamophobia was also used as a double-edged sword, and despite its damage, it forced many in the Muslim community to become more involved in the American social political arena by performing more vital social involvement and civic responsibility. As a result, 9/11 caused many American Muslims, especially those from the immigrant backgrounds, to embrace the American identity and integrate more into American society by constituting Islamic value practices. These trends included, for example, cooperation among Muslim communities, collaboration among diverse Islamic organizations, dawah, call to Islam to non-Muslims, and interfaith dialogue with Christians and Jews, which I will elaborate about it further. One of the results of this social political activity was also the election of the first Congress member, Keith Ellison, in 2006, that before Mamdani, who took his oath on the Quran, Ellison did it in 2006 when he became the first Congress member. So the increased visibility of Islam was also reflected in numbers. For example, in the year of 2000, there was about 1,200 mosques in America, and by the year of 2011, it became 2,100 mosques. And a study that was conducted a few years ago showed that the number has increased to 2,800. And as you can see here, most of the by the location of the mosque, you can see where the population of the Muslims are. Another important catalyst that facilitated the growth of Islam during this period was the rise of new media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, which emerged a few years after 9/11 and enabled Muslim clerics, activists, and organizations to engage in dawah and social political outreach activities to millions of followers and to boost their Islamic circle activities. Therefore, ironically, while 9/11 attacks were considered a major setback to Islam and Muslims in America, they also generated a series of positive consequences that ultimately contribute to the increased visibility of Islam in the American context. In many respects, the attack functioned as one of the most grandiose advertising for Islam in the modern era, which brought the presence of American Muslims to a prominent public focus. So now we move to the section of interreligious relations between Islam and Judaism in America. So as you can see here in this graph, all relations between Jews and Muslims were largely absent in the early and mid 20th century, where Muslim communities were basically small. But during the 60s and the 70s, limited alliances emerged around civil rights and anti-racism, alongside growing tensions linked to the Arab-Israeli conflict after the Six-Day War. In the 80s and the 90s, the increasing prominence of the Palestinian issue and the growing visibility of Muslim communities deepened these divides, despite parallel efforts to promote interfaith dialogue and cooperation on minority rights. These initiatives were also strained by the first and the second intifadas. However, after 9/11, the attacks initially disrupt interfaith activity, but ultimately encourage greater Jewish-Muslim engagement. Rising Islamophobia led many liberal Jewish organizations to express solidarity with American Muslims and to support their civil rights. Nonetheless, enduring political tensions surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and U.S. Middle East relations continue to limit the scope of sustained interreligious cooperation. Now we move to the topic of who is who in American Islam, where I explore the third groups that I mentioned. So I will start with what I call soft Islamist. This group basically represents the mainstream of Islam in America, mostly identified with the Wasatiyah strand of Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, appealing to a broad Muslim audiences who seek to uphold Sharia values within a Western democratic framework. Many figures are second-born generations Muslims who became very popular in the post-9/11 era, trying to bolster the religious and social dimensions of Islam in America with its integration in the West. So there are, of course, a lot of figures. I will focus on two of them. The first is Sheikh Yasser Qadi, up to the left, and Sheikh Omar Suleiman up to the right. And I will say a few words about them. So Sheikh Yasser Qadi is a second generation to Pakistani immigrants and one of the most influential clerics in America. He is the chairman of the Fiqh Council of North America, a resident scholar of Epic Masjid, and also the founder of the Islamic Seminary of America. Omar Suleiman is a second generation to Palestinian immigrants and one of the most popular preachers in the US. So these Muslims basically advocate for social integration, civic participation, and the adaptation of Sharia to American realities. And they also participated in interfaith dialogue and engagement pre-October 7 events. However, at the same time, these figures hold clear anti-Zionist views, which have intensified after the October 7 events. Nevertheless, they still try to emphasize that their opposition is only to Zionism rather than Judaism or Jewish people. So in my opinion, while collaboration with that group has basically the highest potential to change and influence Muslim-Jewish relations because of the prominent status of these figures, the war in Gaza has made it very, very complicated and currently quite impossible to have any dialogue with these figures. Now we move to the moderate Muslim groups. This group is quite visible among segments of the African American Muslim community that continue the legacy of Warith Din Muhammad, who emphasized a Muslim integration into American society and the rejection of racial perverted Islamic ideologies. The representative of this group mostly recognize the right of Israel to exist, but of course they have some of them have criticism about Israel. So an example of that Afro-American group is the Muhammad Mosque in Washington D.C., led by Imam Talib Sharif, who was among the few Muslim voices in America that condemned the Hamas attack after October 7th.
Let me just say that we're going to meet him next week on Sunday. We're going to visit his mosque and meet him
great.
personally, God willing. So, a very
Great.
close friend and partner and a very important figure
Yeah, of course, I met him
for our
too.
cause. Yeah.
This group is also publicly involved in interfaith dialogue initiatives and cooperation with Jewish and Israeli people. An example was the joint delegation to Morocco in 2024, combined of Israeli rabbis and Afro-American imams, engaging in religious diplomacy. In addition to the Afro-American groups, there are other prominent Muslim leaders who engage in this kind of activity, but are inclined to do it more with Jewish people rather than Israeli people. Two examples are Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, one of America's most prominent intellectual cleric, who holds harsh criticism towards Israel, but by and large manifests a soft criticism towards Israel, and he's as you can see here in the picture, always willing to have a dialogue with Jewish people. Another example is Imam Shamsi Ali, an Indonesian American Imam and interfaith leader from New York, who has played a prominent role in promoting Muslim-Jewish dialogue, particularly through cooperation with Jewish organizations and advocacy for religious pluralism and civic coexistence in the post-9/11 era. So an example of it was shortly after October 7th, Shamsi Ali held the interfaith meeting with Rabbi Mark Schneier, a famous rabbi in interfaith dialogue from Queens. Although this discussion revealed tensions between Muslim students from the MSA and Jewish students from Hillel, most participants condemned violence against civilians and religious discriminations, with some emphasizing shared Islamic Jewish traditions as common ground. So this group is considered with the highest potential for Muslim-Jewish dialogue, because these people are also connected to soft Islamic figures that I've mentioned before, and their influence of collaborating can reach many Muslims and many circles across America. The last is pro-Israel Progressive Voices. This is a relatively small yet visible Muslim group. Rejects Islamism and radical Islam, both domestically, globally, and in relation to Israel. This group includes figures such as Zodi Jasser, the founder of the AIFD, who holds American patriotic values identified with the Republican Party, particularly on national security and opposition to political Islam. Another figure is Asra Numani, an Indian American who calls for deep reforms in the religion of Islam and highly supports Israel. Muslim-Jewish collaboration with this group is basically very easy, but sometimes, ironically, because they tend to be automatically, let's say, too pro-Israeli, they don't manifest any complexity or criticism towards the Israeli government, and therefore they are detached from many circles of other Muslim groups that I've mentioned, even the moderate ones. So the echo of collaborating with these people would be very limited.
Let's comment here.
What?
There are other groups that are close to those, like which we're going to meet next week as well. The American Muslim Multi-Faith Women Empowerment Coalition and
Yeah.
Women Muslim Speakers. And it's true. I mean, it's very easy to actually they want to work with us even more than sometimes some Jews want to work with them, which is complex. And it's true that their impact is smaller, but it is significant. Like they do get like tens of
Yes, of
millions of
course,
impressions
it is
on
an
their
impact,
social
but
media. They have impact on
yeah,
Congress members. But I do just want to clear out the Clarity Coalition is a bit. It's almost anti-Islamic. So it's not a religious, not so religious. And here we need to be very careful as religious leaders to connect with those who are genuine, who take their own religion seriously,
yeah,
as well as we as Orthodox rabbis take our religion seriously,
yeah,
and be wary of. Again, I'm not going to open here a discussion about Reform Judaism and conservatism and conservative Judaism and all that. That's a whole different debate. But there's so these movements are a bit similar in the other direction. Only that they are the minority in the Muslim world, and we need to be very careful because sometimes, let's say for Imam Talib Sharif, even though he's very moderate and I can't say he's pro-Israel, but he's definitely pro against Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood and all that. For him, that would be too much. If you work with Clarity, that's like crossing the lines
yeah, of
in a
course,
way. So we need to be very careful
of
about
course.
that.
Yeah, of course. Asra Nomani, for example, she want to change the Islam, like in comparison to Jewish reforms.
Exactly. So I was invited to the conferences, and I
Yeah.
decided that
hmm
I can be in touch with them over email, but being there publicly as a rabbi can actually burn you in other
Yeah.
circles that are much more influential. So that's the kind of things you need to know when you step into this field.
Mhm. Okay, I agree. So, in summary, in this lecture, I explored Islam in America and its relevance for Jewish-Muslim relations, focusing on both historical development and contemporary challenges. In my opinion, while 9/11 and the post-October 7 era strained interfaith dialogue, moderate Muslim actors, especially those engaged in civic integration and religious pluralism, continue to offer the greatest potential for meaningful Jewish-Muslim cooperation in America. Thank you very much.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much, Ella. This is really, really great. I think for us, it's very helpful. If you can stop sharing, then we'll open up for question, just to show us the screen so we can see everybody. Okay. I'm sure many of us have many questions, especially as we're going to meet actually some of those figures next week. So this is very important preparation. So let's open the floor for any questions, comments, concerns you may have. Yeah, Rav Yaakov. And then Rabbi Friedman. Yeah.
So much for the presentation. It was fantastic. Question: is what you call the soft Islamist? I imagine that just in the context of this lecture, we were speaking about potential partners or not potential partners, but certainly I would imagine that there are sizable groups that go far more to the extremist side of the spectrum, or not.
Well, what I've noticed that in America, in comparison to Europe or maybe Australia, there are not so many what we call radical Muslims like the ones you see on memory. I mean, they exist, but they don't have a lot of influence. So this group of soft Islamists is basically a group that decides their opposition to Zionism. They're basically moderate Muslims. I mean, they try to be pragmatic with the religion, with the society. They try to integrate. And I also think that in a way we have lost the train, because before October 7th, and I mean even before, let's say 10 years ago, you could still have a dialogue with these people of South Islamics, the people I mentioned, like people like Yasser Qadi, um, but the political climate today is so on the edge. They are also on the edge. I mean, I listen to what they say, and they sometimes I really feel like they go on the boundaries, and now they're going to say something against Jews. So it's very, very delicate situation, and this is quite unfortunate because I really these people, if you want to influence Muslim Jewish relations in America, these are the people because they have a lot of the social media power is huge. They are basically global imams. They are famous not only in America but in Europe. They have influence on the Middle East. They are very like what I call the rock stars of modern Islam. And unfortunately, the political situation that we are in does not allow us to have a dialogue with these people. And unfortunately, their rejection of Zionism is so high that they don't seem to. Let's say that 10 years ago, some of them supported the two-state solution. Now I don't even hear this. So in a way, it's this is what it is. But as somebody who is involved in Islam in America for more than a decade, I can say from my own experience that it is that we have kind of lost it. I mean, if we would have try to cooperate and get a dialogue with these people 10 years ago, I believe that the situation would be different. But now it's too late, I think.
Well, the lesson for us is, let's not do it again. Let's not miss the next train.
Yeah.
And let's not assume that things will just be okay. And again, the purpose of this group, as I say every session, is not adult education. It's not about getting to hear nice ideas and great research. It's about getting the training and networking we need to actually be effective. So in the next generation, maybe things will be better. So thank you for this lesson. Let's hear Ross, Yehuda, and then Daniel. So Ross, maybe you go first.
Thank you very much. Fascinating. I have really just kind of a curiosity. You mentioned the introduction of Islam into North America through the slave trade. And I was wondering, is that traced at all to the emergence of the Nation of Islam and Islam amongst, or was there a break and restarting? Like, what's the continuity between those two things?
It's not exactly a continuation. It's kind of more than a heritage that the the organization of the Nation of Islam, when it was established, it was established based on the oppression that these enslaved had, and based on their basically historical heritage in this country as Muslims.
I guess I'm asking, was there some sort of historical memory? I guess there are three things that I'm thinking about, and maybe it's neither of them, and you could just clarify for me.
Okay.
Is it that there actually was continuity somehow, that through the generations, the slaves thought of themselves as Muslims, so at least some of them, or was it there was a break, but a attempt to recapture because there was some historical memory? Or was it just there was no connection to the heritage, but some sort of attempt to reestablish? I hope my questions make some sense.
I get it. Yeah, it's quite of a deep historical question. I personally believe that all the answers are true. I mean, there was continuity, there was memory, but it wasn't like something very direct. I mean, the history of Black Muslims in America, it's something, it's a very wide topic, but it's a good question, and thank you for it. And now we'll try to think more about it in my research.
Great. Yehuda, you have 2 minutes.
You. I was just curious how well represented the soft Islamist camp will be at the conference next week, and if we're talking to a Muslim leader, is there some other than sort of the views that they express? Is there a way of gauging what camp they're in? Is it based on the affiliations of the organizations they're affiliated with? How do you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll try to answer the first part, and then Elad, if you can say a few words about the second part. So about the conference next week, I don't know exactly who is going to be there. I know that Imam Talib Sharif is going to be there. Last year, Hamza Yusuf was there. We had a conversation with him. So this Anila Ali and Saraydin, and so let's say the second and third group are definitely going to be represented at the conference, and we're going to meet them and also have some sessions with them, have an event with them on Wednesday in Congress. So that's definitely going to be there. About the first group, I'm not sure they're going to be there because it's really for groups who care about religious freedom, and it's not so much their cup of tea. I would say that Elad, maybe here you'll disagree with me, and that could be great, but I'm a bit more skeptical about the first group, even though it's big, because what we see all over the world, yes, the Muslim Brotherhood organizations tend to be bigger, more organized because they have so much money and so much support, and they're super smart and super strategic, and they just know how to build those organizations. While millions of Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan Muslims have no organizations and no institutional power as immigrants. And the problem is that in many cases they seem moderate and they seem like, oh, they're only anti-Zionist but not anti-Semitic. But in practice, they have a long-term strategy of Islamization, of building a caliphate, of taking over the West. And we should not be naive about that. We should be very aware of that and not play into, because I think I told you this last week about the Australian rabbis, that all of a sudden, all the Muslim organizations in Australia want to talk to the Jewish rabbis after not answering their emails for like 2 years. Why is that? Because they became lovers of Zion? No, because they need the legitimacy. They need a photo with a rabbi to get the government off their back and remain like a legitimate Muslim organization that's actually not supporting terrorism. A lot of those people actually support terrorism. It's more complex because in the Muslim Brotherhood there was a split between those who said that we need to build the caliphate through violence, that's Sayyid Qutb, and people who said we need to build the caliphate through dawah and education and winning the minds and hearts of people, and then we'll do violence at the end. It's a strategic debate, but they all agree on the goal. It's just how to get there. So we need to be very careful about that. And for example, we're going to meet Charles Small from ISGAP in, I think, 4 weeks, who will tell us about the Muslim Brotherhood. Actually, my opinion is that we should actually ally against them and get them outlawed and out of the country and not give them any legitimacy and more power than they already have. But Elad, if you have a few words on how do you identify those actors, and then we'll take one last question from Robert Friedman, and then we'll have to conclude. Yeah.
Well, the issue of the Muslim Brotherhood is it's very difficult as a researcher to answer it about this like black and white. Because, for example, the individuals that I've mentioned in this presentation about the Islamist, soft Islamist, I have videos of them, and now videos of them that they argue, no, we don't want Khalifa, we don't want to, we try to make dawah for the sake of dawah, not for the sake of for the Islamization of the society. And the problem is that that once you don't believe what they say, and you not you specifically, but once we don't believe that what they say is true, and we always think that they want that they want to lie, and they have a hidden agenda. So I don't think that it is very productive. I mean, it's like the saying from Judaism. I don't know how to rephrase it in English. Kabdeo v'chashdeo, like respect him, but
Yeah.
also suspect him. And I think it's not good to only to suspect. And I think that what we're doing with the Muslim Brotherhood, by and large, is only suspecting. Always try to make it more radical than it is. And by the way, these people that I showed you before, they said very frankly that they are not related to the Muslim Brotherhood. So it is a very I mean, even ISGAP, with all due respect, they don't have a proof that, because there is no Muslim Brotherhood declared organization in America or in the West. So it's something that you cannot improve. Even I mean, it's not like that you find a document that said we plan to conquer the West in this 100 years.
Yeah,
So I think
go ahead.
So I think that we should try to think a little bit out of the box, because I think that we are too much with this Dawa is terror and Islamization of society, and we stop thinking more clearly. And I don't think that this is something which has benefit the Muslim-Jewish dialogue that we try to achieve. And always be with this key point, like suspect him and respect him, but not try to delete one of it for the sake of the other, because in the long run, I don't think that it is productive.
Yeah, thank you. Kabdo v'chashdo, that's the motto of this field of interfaith diplomacy, basically. We should have it over our beds or something. Robert Friedman, let's take a quick question, because I do want to leave like 2 or 3 minutes for Alex to introduce his work. So, Friedman,
very short, direct questions. Thank you, Elad. Wonderful presentation and lecture. Nice to see everyone as well. I'm looking at it from a South African perspective lens, and I'm curious into the various organizations and Muslim communities that you discussed in America. Firstly, is there a gadol for the Muslim community in America, or are they very much separated as you described them? And you know, the relationship between the various organizations, is there point of conflict between them? That's on the one hand. And then the second one, just something I'm fascinated about, which is maybe just a quick answer, is how do you find these various organizations are happy to deal with women in an interfaith setting? And I'll just frame it. In South Africa, that's one of the challenges we find ourselves when dealing with the stricter Muslim communities, is they're only interested in sitting with men. And that's why I ask it.
Can you please repeat the questions?
The American Muslim organizations, is there one gadol, one leader of all the organizations in terms of how they align themselves? Is there any conflict between any of the various sects in American Islam?
You mean between the groups that I've mentioned, or in the groups?
Yes. Between the groups that you mentioned.
Yeah, of course. I mean, when I mentioned soft Islamists or moderate Muslims or progressive Muslims, so of course that they are not. I mean, progressive Muslims like Asr Numani and Yasser Qadi see themselves as an enemy of each other, even though both of them basically try to battle radical Islam. But for example, I also see something that what I told Aaron before. For example, the Congress, the Muslim Congress member Ilhan Omar, people see her as Islamist, right? But basically they don't know that she supported LGBT rights, and she a few years ago the organization of the Muslim Brotherhood, ISNA, did not want her to come to the conference, and the organization of CARE, which I've mentioned also, did host her, and because of that, Islamist voice in America started to criticize CARE and to criticize Ilan Omar. So it's quite complicated. So that's why I myself as a researcher try to be cautious of black and white colors, because when you do research about something and you think that A is only black and Y is only white, so you don't see the complexity of the topics, and the whole and basically the American Islam is very complicated. It's quite you have communities from 75 countries in the world. There is no other Muslim community that have so many people. Did I answer your questions? Or
Okay. Ella, thank you so much. Well, we actually just ran out of time. This is truly fascinating and very helpful for us, I think, especially for people going next week to Washington, but in general, get this overview of Islam. As I said, we jumped to the end, but we're going to take a step back. In the next session, the next 4 or 5 sessions, we're going to take a deep dive into Christianity and Nashatat and all that, and then deep dive into Islam and the basics of Islam and study some Quran together to get some more background for those movements. Alex, would it be okay if because I want to respect everybody's time, and I want to give you enough time to present, so maybe we'll do it in the next meeting.
Totally fine. Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, that sounds good.
Because we reached our deadline, and I don't want to keep people on the line. Okay, thank you all. I'll see some of you next week in Washington, and all of you hopefully in 2 weeks on Zoom. Hi, Eli, good to see you. And enjoy the rest of the week. And there's a lot to process, a lot to think here. Amy will send you the recording and the notes, and we'll discuss this more next time. Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Elad, do you have any materials you can share with us of your research or recommended readings or podcasts or anything like that, just so we can prepare, even more for the for the conference? I think that everything you shared was incredible, and I just love to be able to learn more.
Maybe you can share your email and I will send you.
Yeah, here I'll put my email.
Or send him, but also send me, and I can send it to the group.
Okay. Send it to Rav Aaron, and he'll send it to all of us.
And you are talking about books, articles, things like that?
Anything that you think might be helpful. Yeah, books, articles, maybe I'm not sure if I'll have the time to read a couple of books before, Sunday, but I still would love to have them on my shelf to be able to read.
Okay, no problem.
Okay,
Awesome.
great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.